Casual Magic has been brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can get cool stuff. Use the code CASUAL to get 5% off of your sale. And then also by Coalesce Apparel, where you can get really cool t-shirts and stuff, and use the code CASUALMAGIC to get 10% off your sale. And by Archidect, a deck hosting website that doesn't really sell anything, but they like me and I like them, so kindly use them. And now, on to the show. And welcome to Casual Magic, the show where we talk about the fun side of Magic the Gathering. My name is Shivam, Bhatt, and Casual Magic was brought to you by Archidect, Cool Stuff, and Coalesce. Today, I have a very special guest with me, the person whose article introduced me to Commander in the first place back in Innistrad, and is the reason I have a Grim Grin deck, and frankly, is one of my favorite commentators, I don't know, but Magic announcer guys in the business, Tim Willoughby. Hi, Tim. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited. It's like literally been, I've wanted to talk to you for years and years and years and years now.
Yeah, and even the conversations about us getting to talk has been at least 18 months, I would say.
Seriously. I mean, look, there's time zones, the whole Atlantic Ocean thing, and also the fact that you opened up a bar in the middle of a pandemic, which means you have a real job that you have to actually run. And it's hard for us West Coasters to actually run into folks from London. But I've been on quite an English streak lately, so I'm super excited to have you here, man. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing all right. It's funny. Many moons ago, I used to work in the film industry, and we used to have this funny thing of like London calls to California about movies, where it'd be like, okay, you're going to tell me at the end of the day that you need something first thing in the morning. But that's fine, because I've got like a whole working because of how big the time differences are. So it's wild. Like normally when I do podcasts in the US, it's because I'm in the US. But the last couple of years, there's not been quite so much travel.
That's true. I mean, it was worse for me when I worked at Sony PlayStation, and I was used to make trailers for video games. And that meant that I would have to download something 4 terabyte file overnight from FTP from Japan, do my work on it in the day, and then I would have to sit there and actually like edit it and then upload it again and hope that the next morning that when they woke up, they had all the things I needed. And it was like, dude, those are sweaty days. Not my favorite times.
The global marketplace, what a world.
Yeah, right? Like, I mean, it's weird because especially like with Magic where we are so, I mean, it's so America-centric, but it's also a huge global game. And that means there's like people I need to talk to in Europe or China or Japan or whatever. And that is hard to manage when we're all trying to.
It is, but it's also like when people ask me about what's best about Magic, one of the most rad things to me is, and I'm sure the same would be true for you, that if something weird happened and all of a sudden you got picked up and dropped in any city or any developed city on the planet, regardless of whether or not you know the language, but ideally if you know a little bit of the language, on a Friday night you can find some people that share some common interests with you that you'll be able to have a nice time with, even if nothing else is going right for you in whatever part of the world you're in, which is insane. It's amazing. Like I've been very lucky to travel a lot for Magic, and having that little cultural touchstone to relate to people, even if everything else is wild and different, is rad.
Well, I mean, I just go back to that first Worlds I went to in San Francisco in 2011. When I was sitting there, and this like, I've come back to Magic. This is my first time going to an actual event. And, they have $5 drafts on Wednesdays because the team matches are done and whoever bombs out, they've got nothing else to do. And I was like, I've never drafted before and it's only $5. Sure, why not? And you're sitting down and it's like you're sitting with Team Finland or Team Japan or whatever. People you have like the barest minimum communication with, but you can still sit there and say, tap, attack. And they're like, yeah, let's go. It was sweet. It was so much fun to like sit there and just be playing with people that we have no common nothing with, but we all understood what was on the table. And I was like, oh, this is the best. And I miss those team events too.
Oh, team events are always incredible. If you do ever find yourself playing against Japanese players that don't have any English whatsoever, one phrase that I learned at a Japanese GP or something that it's nothing rude, it's nothing unpleasant, but if you say it in the middle of a game, it really, really confuses and slightly freaks out your opponent. Is they make a play that's surprising or whatever, and you just go Majide, which
Hang on,
basically means something along the lines of really,
really?
and all of a sudden you sort of you just break that facade
Oh
very
yeah, they
briefly.
suddenly they get thrown way right out. So like, I speak Japanese semi fluently enough to be able to get
Oh,
by and
fine,
live there.
okay.
When I was living there, I spoke it much better than I do now. Like enough to be able to communicate, right? And so it would be funny because like you'd be sitting there, I'd go to like the card store in Ibaraki or something and look around, and I could communicate with them, but they were like very confused. But especially more so in America because when I came back from Japan is when I went to that world thing, so I could speak still enough Japanese to be like, I don't know, like pointing to their card and be like, I attacked that one, and they're like, "Whoa, you speak Japanese?" I'm like a 3-year-old does, but enough to be able to tell you what I'm doing. And they were always so happy. They were like not happy, but like amused, and it was just like it made the game more fun.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely, yeah.
yeah, I love that. I love that. And God, you've been traveling like you've been to GPs and PTs and everything all over the place, haven't you? For like a long time.
Yeah, it's one of those weird ones that, the little color in maps that you can get to show all the places that you've been. My map is very well colored in considering the amount of airports and convention centers I've been to. Like in the latter stages, I got a little bit better about trying to make sure that I also did some sightseeing and cultural bits and pieces. But for a long while, I have technically been to an awful lot of places and I've met lots of incredible people and had some fantastic times, but I've not necessarily, I wouldn't consider myself as widely traveled as my passport does.
I mean, that's one of the things about Magic players, especially like the grinder types. They'll be like, "Yeah, man, I've been to like my flight schedule says I've been to 15 countries in the past 3 months. However, I've gone from airport to convention center and back again, and every convention center in the world looks exactly the same. And for some reason, they same still have the same like $15 sack of nachos or whatever. And you're like, well, I mean, you're sitting in concrete box to concrete box. It's not really
I mean,
living very much.
that world's in San Francisco. That was at the like
It was in a
big
big
place out
warehouse.
nearby the water, right?
Yes, at
Yeah,
Fort Mason.
that's the one. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, I was at that one. That was fun. That was the one where Reed Duke won the Mox. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it
That's
was
the
the
first time
one
I met Reed
where
Duke, actually.
yeah, and it was the first time I met Reed Duke because afterwards he sat and was doing a side event, and I was like getting completely, my clock cleaned at the draft or whatever, and I'm like, dude, forget it. I'm quitting. Like he beat me, and I'm like, I think I'm just done with Magic. And he stopped and he taught me how to build a deck. And he said, yo, hang on, you drafted good cards, you just don't know how to put them in the right places. And he spent like 15 minutes between the rounds just teaching me how to actually play limited. And I attribute that to me staying with Magic and not just being like, this was a fun hobby. I'm going home and moving on with the rest of my life.
Uh,
So
I,
like, yeah.
Definitely a classy gent, but I think that a lot of people have that. I'm going to call it like the origin story of maybe not the moment they learn to play, but the moment that they're like, if this had gone differently, I'd be out, but now I'm
Yeah.
very much in. So, like, for me, it was, I mean, I started playing in like revised and I didn't
Yeah, you and I
really,
started around the same time, way early.
yeah, but I didn't ever really stop I took a slow down around Tempest until sort of late Saga Block. But
Mm,
I was always playing to some extent. But my first tournament was the Invasion pre-release,
mm,
and this was at a time when, rather than it being, you go into a pre-release and the full set has been formally broadcast. There's no spoilers about it. It's literally been shared with everyone for a week, and
mhm,
everyone, in principle, if they want to, has figured out what they want to do and how the set works. At this point in pre-releases, you would maybe have seen 15% of the cards in the set, maybe, if you're really paying attention. And so everyone's going in borderline completely blind, playing sealed deck. And I opened a golden ticket. I just opened a really good deck and I was doing really well through no great talent of my own. And it gets to the last round of the Swiss. And back in those days, the top 8 of a pre-release would be draft.
mm,
Had never drafted before. Not a big worry. But yeah, so I'm in the last round of the Swiss. I'm playing against someone, and I've got a card called Breath of Daragaz in my deck.
mm,
It's a very good card in Invasion. It basically was uh, Earthquake for 2, or if you kick it, it's Earthquake for 4. So 4 damage to all players and all non-flying creatures. And
Right.
I was playing my game, and I think I had a Blazing Spectre in play. My deck was great. So I had this 2/2 flyer
Wow.
that every time it hits people, it makes them discard stuff, and it's got haste. It was a very,
Oh, that
very
card
good,
is so good.
so good. So I'm beating up my opponent, but at some point he gets a big board, and I cast Breath of Daragaz. Um, it's a pre-release. People mess up all the time at pre-releases, right? I put
Mm.
my Blazing Spectre in the bin. I put it in the graveyard, and
Oh, no.
yeah,
No, it
I,
had
I misread the
flying.
card. My opponent misread the card, and it gets to like time gets called, and or we get sort of close to the end of the round, and I realize like 2 or 3 turns later that
It was supposed to be
my
alive?
Blazing Spectre was supposed to be in play. If it had been in play, it would not have been remotely close. I would easily have won this game, and I'm gutted. I'm at this point. I don't know how old I would have been. I can probably work it out, but I was very tournament young, even if I wasn't very young. Uh, I was gutted. My opponent was a judge who was very active on the scene at the time, and
They
like
should have known better.
I mean, they should have known better. But the thing was that literally this was a time when no one had seen the cards before the morning that they opened the
Sure.
packs, and he may very well literally not have seen that card until the point I cast it against him.
Mm.
So I don't hold it on him at all. But he had a choice in that moment as to how to sort of handle it, and he was just like, "Yeah, if you'd done that right, you would obviously have won. So I scoop," which was
Oh,
lovely. Like
that's
that's not
that's really
necessary at
nice.
all. Like if you're playing at pre-releases, gang, you don't have to do that. But at the same time, I think it's worth thinking about the sort of the ramifications of what you do. That like
Yeah.
if in that moment he had been you know, really tough on the rules in that and sort of said, sorry, you missed it. We can't rewind the game state. It's a draw. You're out of top 8. Or if he'd said, haha, whatever, basically almost any other ending of it would have not made that much difference to him, but might very well have been the end of my story with Magic the Gathering
Right.
entirely. And as it stands, I got in the top 8, obviously got completely destroyed in the draft, as one might imagine. But it really did make a difference to my whole view on what being a good opponent is. And like at a
Right.
pre-release, we're not talking about if it's a pro tour or something, or if it's a different
Well, yeah, I mean,
circumstance.
but
But like,
context matters, right? Like
yeah,
for me, it's an issue of you want to present yourself in a way that makes the other person want to come back and play again. More than that, you want to be an ambassador of like just if you're playing against somebody, it doesn't hurt you to be nice to them. You don't need to throw the game like that. You don't need to do something big and dramatic like that. But like for instance, like Reed helping me build my deck afterwards made enough of an impression on me that I was like, okay, well, that's really cool. Maybe I'll give this another shot. Or like, you see this sort of thing all the time where people are just like, "Hey, you know what? The person who taught me how to play, they blew me out of the water, but they helped me out or they showed me how and they gave me another chance," or any number of these sort of things. It's like, "Yo, somebody gave me a pile of draft chaff and that just made my day." It's like just how you present and how you behave means all the world's difference for a player who's coming in. That's why like I looked at cards like Iona, which I've one of the saddest stories I've ever seen in Commander was like I went to a table and everybody was playing and somebody had brought in their mono white precon that they had just bought or something. And another person was playing like black white reanimator angels or something. And the table was there. And this person just casts Iona and just names white because they see what's on the table. And they're like, yeah, I've got enough black cards I can manage or whatever. The rest of the table is sitting there. They've got like their 2 or 3 color decks they can play, but this white player, you could tell this is like their first time going to an FNM. This is their first time going to a game where they've sat with people. They didn't know how to politic their way out of it. They didn't know how to like talk about it. They were just sitting there like draw, discard, and sad. And they were somewhere between like 14 to 16 years old, some younger aged kid, and they just picked up their cards quietly and left. And I'm like, we're never seeing that player again because nobody thought about their experience, right? Like, it doesn't take much to at least have a converse. I mean, it doesn't take much to be nice. Just to be nice. It's
it
fine. Like,
doesn't. And like, I mean, we're going to briefly dip in and out of the Commander ban list now because you know that I'm all about this.
yeah,
This
I
is
forgot to mention, Tim is on the CAG with me, and I'm very pleased about it. And you've also written a very lengthy essay about why every card on the ban list is on the ban list.
I'm actually revising that at the moment not my opinions haven't changed, but just cleaning it up a little bit because we're going to
Sure.
have a version on the Commander website. Just so because it is genuinely a useful thing, I think, to get a little bit of a sense of why
A
stuff
lot of
is.
people don't have the context for why a card is banned because they just look at it in a vacuum and they're like, "This card seems reasonable. Why would it be gone?" And then you're like, "Oh, well, here's the experiences that led us to remove this," and that I think is worthwhile to share.
And obviously, there's tons of loopy powerful things in Commander, and some of them are really, really unfun play experiences. But like to me, the thing that really stands out for most cards on the ban list, and we're not going to turn this into an hour about the ban list
No.
because that's not super fun. It's not super casual either. But it's just um, the cards that are banned, by and large, are the ones that in the games that they would show up in create a disproportionately bad experience for a bunch of players in a way that for the person that's playing it, they might not even realize how bad the thing that they're doing is for everyone else.
Right.
That's kind of a complicated sentence, but like obviously you've got super duper powerful things at one end of the spectrum on the banned list where you go, I totally get it. I can see that it's really difficult for some of these cards to not be like channel, right?
Mm.
You pay 2 mana, you got 39 life to spend on mana. Yeah, I can see how that unbalances a game. Um, Everyone else has a hard time, you just win by miles. But lots of other cards on the list are more contentious because people are like, but if you unbanned it, it's not even good. I wouldn't even play it in my CEDH game. I wouldn't even play it in my power level 7 game. It's like,
Mhm.
it doesn't really matter if you wouldn't play it in your power level 7 game. Us unbanning it or having it banned either way around doesn't impact you. But if the place where that card would be played is like a power level 5 or 3 or whatever level game where it looks really enticing, but ultimately makes the game horrible,
Mhm.
maybe it shouldn't be around. Like, I recognize that that's kind of a weird, ephemeral, brief mention. And
But the thing is, like Paradox Engine was like one of these things where it's like when I'm playing it, it's fun and fine. I've got things to do. I'm bouncing cards. I'm untapping stuff. I've got a whole bunch of stuff. I'm doing action, so I'm not bored. There's things happening. It's cool. The player 3 seats down from you has now been waiting 45 minutes for their turn to come around, if it ever comes around, because you don't have a determinate win. And it's just like, oh, that's not very good.
yeah, and
Um,
like, there's a few cards like that that, like, the sort of the busy work cards. So a lot of
mhm.
storm decks can fall into this category. Corvold decks, Chillane decks.
I built a Nira deck recently, and I finally got a chance to put it out. And Nira is basically one of these spell slinger type decks. Play cantrip, flip over the top card, and then like omniscience and all this weird stuff. And I had a turn that took like half an hour because I've never played a blue red deck before. I've never played this. I didn't know how to stack all of my triggers and stuff. And after that, I immediately basically took half the deck apart because I realized this is a terrible experience for everybody who's playing against me. Even if I master this deck, still having all of this just crap to remember and think about is such a drag on everybody I'm playing with's experience that's not going to be an ultimately net fun experience for me.
Yeah, and that sounds hauntingly similar to my Kraken Sakashima story. That
God,
essentially, you know, when Commander Legends came out, I looked at those two cards and thought, well, these are clearly great together. You can do some nutty things. And I was correct. You can do some nutty things.
turns out Krakashima is not that bad.
Like, in essence, I took it apart. I guess I still technically have it if I wanted to get a game in with it, but I essentially removed all of the biggest counting mechanics from the deck. So, like,
Mm,
there are no rituals because
mm.
the game just takes a million years to resolve your ritual that then copies and goes back to all of that nonsense. Now it's like, I will archive trap you. It costs 0. I just need to see how many copies I get by rolling some dice, and then I don't need to resolve it very many times. Like, but it'll do the trick. Like, as it turns out, when you get
Archive
to cast
trap,
lots of
Jesus.
spells, it's completely fine. Um, but yeah, I think that there's a certain amount of like self awareness that can lead to keeping like either I don't want to tell anyone how to have fun, but at the same time, I will tell people if I'm not having very much fun, so that maybe next time we can tweak things a little bit. And like, I think a
Right?
bit of self awareness can really help in that.
Yeah, I like one of the things Olivia likes to say is that rule 0 is for game 2. It's not necessarily for game 1 is we're just establishing baselines of what types of players are we? What are we doing? Where are we going? Once we've done that, we're like, "Hey, you know what? Maybe next time let's not play that one because that's not kind of really a great vibe for the rest of us." And that's where you can have a much better and much more informed discussion about how to balance your games. The problem is for stranger play when you're at the LGS or whatever, you don't have a game 2. So you gotta figure out a way to establish a game 1.
Yeah, I have a slightly different view to Olivia on it. So I don't mind having a reasonably like I mean I'll just talk to people as long as the day is long. But when it comes to pre-game conversations, I think that there's some useful like starting points. So sort of obviously you're trying to gauge what power level people are playing at, and that is what it is, and it however that works. But I think that over and above that, just being able to sort of go, do I have any red lines? Any stuff that I know that regardless of
Red
how
lines is a good
powerful your
idea.
deck is, do I have any things that I'm just like either in general or at least for today that I don't want to have to sit with. So like for me,
Mm,
I know that my lifetime red line is I don't want to play against decks that take extra turns. Like
fair.
even if it works out that someone believes that they're doing that fairly quickly and efficiently, I've had enough games where that's gone poorly that I'm just like, no, you know what? This is one that I'm just going to sit out. And obviously, in principle, you can get to a point where people have the classic 1996 no discard, no counters, no removal, no mass removal. Like at some point, you can talk yourself out of a game. But if one person shows up and goes, you know what, gang, I just I've had a long day. I just don't want to play against like a Staxy deck.
Mm,
We can all work with that. Or if someone, if someone like me comes along and says, I don't want to play against extra turns, but everything else is fair game. Like
mm.
it's almost like we're going to a restaurant to order a meal and they have spicy food. You just say how spicy is too spicy.
Sure.
You don't have to say I'm not going to have. You don't need to
Yeah,
give me any
like,
more
I don't
detail.
need you to give me an essay on your dietary restrictions. Just say, like, what you're not into, and then we can move from there.
Yeah,
Um,
everyone's allowed a few things that they don't like. Let's just acknowledge them, figure it out before the game, and then I mean, game two, it's much easier to get really well balanced than game one, but at least that way, game one, we got a chance.
alright, so let's turn away from this for a second, because otherwise I know exactly where this conversation is gonna go, and I'm super happy to have it because you're on the CAG for a reason. We brought you on because you got incredibly erudite thoughts about this. But I personally am more interested in, how you, because like my first awareness of you was literally you used to write for the mothership, and
Mhm.
then you started doing like commentary and stuff on the pro tours and doing like, you know, things with like Marshall and what, why can I not remember what that's called? It's like commentating, right? That's what we call
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Like,
we did some of
yeah,
that.
yeah. Didn't you do like play by play or something like that on the pro
I
tour, or were
did.
you normally the guy doing the
So
interviews?
I started off on text coverage. So strictly, I was on coverage since
Yeah. So how did you get into that
Worlds of
game?
like 2006, I think.
Oh, damn.
I think Worlds in Paris, whatever year that was. So maybe it was the year that Dragonstorm did well. One of the years that Dragonstorm did well. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
like, I that was in my interregnum, so I can't tell you.
but yeah, like I think my first GP had Ravnica day one and Cold Snap day two or something. It was wild. It was weird.
What?
On coverage.
Who? What?
But
Why
yeah,
did they do that?
I, I think Cold Snap was like literally just coming out. I don't know quite why they mixed it up, but it was in Sweden. It was in Malmo, I think. Um, anyway, I got into coverage through. I had been playing Magic forever,
Hmm.
but had never been any great shakes at it. I was fine. I still would not say that I'm any great shakes at actually playing. Like I could, I've beaten good players, and I'm not terrible, but I would
Yeah,
say
like, exactly. I understand exactly what you're saying.
that. But while I was living in London, working in the film industry, and had some free time on my hands, a completely different game by a different publisher came out that essentially they wanted to set themselves up to have a pro tour, much
Hmm.
like Magic did. So the game was called Versus System. It was sort of
Oh, I remember
superheroes.
Versus.
Yeah. So this was at the very, very start of that game. And they said, "Oh, we want to have a pro tour," and that's an exciting time for any game where they're still trying to figure out the details of what their game even is. And a few friends of mine all decided we were going to have a crack at this, see if we could do well. And long story short, we came up with a great deck, showed up to the first event. Kibler won that event, um, which was one of his first big. Like, he had obviously done well at Magic prior to that, but it was one of his first proper big money wins. And then they had
Mhm.
the equivalent of a GP at the same time as it. That when
Mm.
I didn't make day 2 of the Pro Tour, I then won the GP.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
and so I met various coverage people that were covering the event, and I wrote like some report about the deck and my experiences and whatnot. And Brian
Mhm.
David Marshall saw it, and basically he got me a gig writing for the equivalent of the mothership for that game, and then doing coverage for that game.
I
Which
didn't
I
know BDM cared about the versus system, but I guess it makes sense. He loves him some comic books.
Yeah, he loves a comic book, and he was very familiar with both, the people that designed it and various the coverage people that they had. So he kind of got me the hookup to initially get in working with them. I did a number of years working on that, and then when the Pro Tour came to London, which would have been 2004, 2005 ish. It's a very weird Pro Tour because it was the one where there was a terrorist attack in London that weekend. Um, that
Was that the tunnel one?
it was,
They
yeah,
attacked the
there were
subway
bombs
or
on
something.
buses and trains, and the
Yes,
whole of
yes, I
London
remember
got shut down.
yeah, I remember
That was the Wednesday before the event, and
that.
essentially, so you were talking about the $5 drafts at Worlds. On that Wednesday, in order to keep everyone calm and keep everyone chill at the venue, at 1 p.m. they were £1 drafts. At 2
Oh,
p.m. they were £2 drafts, and so on as you went through the day. Just
that's
because they were like,
clever.
let's keep everyone here. Let's keep everyone sort of
Fly him with
feeling
product
a
and
little
keep
bit
him
loved.
quiet.
And but yeah, so that was the first event that I did any coverage for Magic. I did like a couple of feature matches or something, and I parlayed that into doing a whole bunch more events. I did some writing for the Mothership. Most of the writing I did for the Mothership was pre-release primers,
Mm,
which I still loved. I love the challenge of going. You need to write the same thing that you wrote last time,
but
only
different.
different. But you still need to have all of the same beats. It's like what I imagine it must be like to be Lee Childs writing his next Jack Reacher book. That, like, essentially it needs to be the exact same book that it was last time because that did great. Just change everything.
Yeah,
Um,
just change the nouns and you'll be fine. Just
uh, but yeah,
some
so
Mad Libs.
I did that, and at some point, I got the opportunity to switch into doing video, and I think at that point they already knew that it's difficult to shut me up once I get started, and so yeah, I did a bunch of play by play and hosting, and yeah, like, and the gang that's doing it now, like, in principle it's not impossible I'll do more, but I think that the world has turned and left me a little bit when it comes to coverage at this point, so I'm kind of focusing on running my game store / bar and you know doing other bits
I
of
mean,
caggy things.
yeah, that's a shame because I really, really enjoyed your coverage. Like, for years, I mean, I've long said, like, one of my favorite things to do was I used to, like, do housework or yard work or whatever, and I'd have my phone in my back pocket, and I'd be listening to, like, coverage of GPs or of the SCG or whatever, and you just have a very good voice for, like, telling us what's going on, and it's just really fun, and I miss those days when we would have, like, GPs all over the world so that at any given time you could turn on a stream and it would be like, "Today in GP Shanghai is blah, blah, blah," and or, GP Malmo or GP Barcelona and GP Kansas, and it would just be cool. Of course, that was like that's a different world than the one we live
Very
in
much
now.
so, yeah, and like, I think that you raise a really good point when it comes to how coverage gets consumed, is that I think that sometimes we assume that you've got a bunch of eyeballs looking directly at a screen that are reading every card, looking at everything, and practically I think for a lot of people it is radio. Um,
Yeah.
and so sometimes it's not necessarily about, like, obviously you need to convey the detail that's there so that people can have a general sense of what's going on. But to be honest, if it's you can more get a sense of the ebbs and flows and the sort of how the game is going and how the people are doing in it. sometimes you can get away without some of those details. Like
Right.
the number of times that I did not mention what land anyone played was almost all of them, because almost all of the time it doesn't matter what land that someone's played.
I mean, it only matters if they missed, right? Like,
And
if
like,
they miss a land drop, then you say it, but if they hit it, then who cares?
yeah, thinking
But
about nice things for new players, actually, something that I've been toying about with a little bit in Commander is if someone's a really new player with a
mm,
comparatively, I'm not going to call it low powered deck, but like not optimized deck, let's say, um,
sure.
I'll just be like, all right, we're going to assume that all of your lands come into play untapped and you can tap them for whatever color of mana you want. It's not going to make your deck a powerhouse, but all it's going to mean is that you don't need to worry about that nonsense. The game will feel a lot smoother and faster,
Mm.
and we can all have a lovely time.
I mean, because realistically speaking, once you're no matter what kind of deck you're playing, once you get to a certain threshold of lands, it's just easy to assume that you're going to have the mana for whatever you need to do, anyways. Like after a while, I just don't care anymore. I'm just like, I tap. Do I have the right number? Because the colors will kind of smooth themselves out as they go. It's like whatever. If you built your deck such that you have lands in play, chances are your lands will do the thing you want them to do.
Yeah,
Um,
like I wouldn't necessarily make it so that every 5 color dragons player gets to automatically cast everything
yeah,
perfectly all the time, but
sure.
especially for
So
newer players, I'm like, let's just have a nice game.
sure, but there's a difference between like the dude running a maximum dragon deck, and then the person who's just come here with their random, robot tribal, and you're like, you know, it's
Yeah,
fine.
building a
It's fine.
3 color mana base plus is trickier. Let's just wipe that off for a little bit. Sorry,
Yeah,
little digression, but it's something I've been thinking about for a little bit lately.
I think a lot about what it takes to bring a new player into the game, and teaching them via commander is so complicated, and yet at the same time, it works really well because there's like weird cards. But if you're like, I handed an elf deck to a friend once, and like, yeah, there's cards from Up and Down Magic. They're all weird. They're all have slightly different variants of the same mechanic. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you're like, okay, look, they all tap for mana, they all say elf on them, and they all have cards that say, if you have X amount of elves, Y thing happens. As long as you can read and process, you should be able to manage. And the rest of it just kind of smoothly gets out. Like teaching new players to play it means being willing to take back turns or let them take back and say, like, yo, this is the smarter way you could have done that, and give them another shot. Because again, your first game, you're not here to crush them. You're just here to ensure that there's a second game, right?
Yeah, like I've taught. At this point, I don't know how many people how to play Magic at various different stages of the game, and like I definitely think that Commander is a way that you can get someone to the point where they're having a lovely time really quickly. I normally when I'm teaching people, I'll try and get them through the basics of literally, this is how you tap a land, this is what the mana cost is, this is what combat is, etc. I'll normally do that in a one-on-one game, just
Mm,
potentially face up initially or not, maybe not, depending on their experience of other games. Um, but like, yeah, I think the thing with Commander is, let's imagine it's the platonic ideal of a 4-player game. Like, you get a support network of 3 people to help usher
exactly.
them through the experience. And I like to give new players a couple of like almost like a plot synopsis for their deck, of like, this is roughly what it's trying to do. This is roughly how it does it. I'm going to leave the details to you because you're a smart person and you can read. You can have a look at these things. If there's ever things you need rules help on, like, we will never let you fall. We are your
Right.
safety net on the rules. And often I'll give like a couple of little, almost like little missions, because sometimes there are cards. So like counter spells, I think they can be very empowering for a new player, or they can
Mm,
be very disheartening, depending like if they have them in their own hand. Um,
mm,
because let's say that they've got nothing to do on turn 2, they pass with 2 islands up, and you untap, play your third land, and cast a cultivate, and they're like, haha, counterspell. Everything that they've done there is functionally, technically correct. Um, and it will have a meaningful impact on the game, but at the same
mm.
time, it's not exciting. It's not the stuff that stories are made
Yeah,
of.
like that's
Um,
not the counter spell. That's not the spell you want to be countering, right? Like you want to counter the crater hoof that's going to come after that cultivate.
100%. So the line that I normally give people on counter spells is keep this in your hand. At some point, the rest of the table will react to something that's happening. In that moment, you get to be the hero of the table by stopping that thing. And when you achieve that, you, like if nothing else happens, you will have had a pivotal role in how that game finishes up.
Oh, that's a good way to say that, because like, that is one of the big problems with counterspells is, like, where and when do you use it? How do you use it? What do you point it at? And it's, like, it's a level up moment to realize that you don't wanna shoot it at the developing part, but at the thing that it grows into, right? Like, when whatever their payoff is, when you counter that, that's when they feel stuffed, and that's when you feel like a hero. Countering someone's cultivate, just like, well, you stopped me from ramping lands today. Tomorrow, I'm going to still do that, but with my Kodama's reach that I've got in my hand as well.
yeah, I
Um,
mean, like I think judging decks power levels is really really hard,
it's
and
impossible.
figuring out what you're going to counter is also really really hard if you want to do it perfectly. But much with much with anything in Commander, at least, like if you don't do it perfectly, it doesn't matter. Like you can still have a lovely time if you're a little ways back from that. It's just a matter of making sure that you feel like you've got agency in the game. And if you
Yes,
blow all of your spells the first
yes.
chance you get, you might just never get that feeling.
Agency is such an important part. And I mean, that was the other weird thing. Like my Nira deck has like no counter spells because they're bad drops for Nira. But everybody's looking at me like, you're the blue player at the table. Why aren't you stopping this? And I'm like, I'm not that kind of blue player. I don't have anything to help you with. Sorry.
Yeah,
How
I
do
tend
you
to at most I'll have two.
Yeah.
I'm also not that kind of player, but I will
Yeah,
have
I'm not,
tons of other interaction.
and the two counter spells will always be like gimmicky ones like Arcane Denial or something that lets you get cards or some weird like
Yeah,
I
it'll
think
be
you were the
drown in
one.
the lock
Yeah,
or
Drown of the Lock or, y you didn't say please or, weird gimmick
oh
ones.
yeah, like Nimble Obstructionist will get cycled at some point. Merfolk Trickster. I'm a big Merfolk Trickster stan.
Ugh, I hate that card so much. But that and, like, the new one drop counter that's like, "Here's some treasures instead." It's so cheeky, I hate that card, but it's so
An offer
good.
you can't refuse. It's like I think that WotC has done an excellent job in the last couple of years of making counter spells that feel more like moments, not necessarily because they're better, but just because they've
Mm,
got great names. So, like
yeah.
when you play
It's so
Didn't Say Please, so my business partner Gav, he often runs Didn't Say Please as one of the counters in his blue decks because he is the sort of person that will have a bunch of counters, and he literally has a standard rule that if when someone casts a spell, if they say please, he will never counter it with didn't say please. It creates some very weird, surprisingly polite games, but it's fun. It's nice.
If you like, I would like to request my chance to please play this you said please, I guess I can't didn't say please you.
Sometimes he'll ask someone if they want to say please for that, and they'll say please, and be like, oh, resolves. He just likes pushing people around though. Sometimes at a table, though. To be fair,
When did you get into Commander? How did you find that?
um, I probably saw it at some event because
Mm.
it started in the judge
Because you
community.
used to go to a lot of events, right? Like,
Yeah, so at my peak, I was probably doing a GP every 3 weeks.
that's insane. That's
Yeah,
so much travel.
it wears you down after a while, but it's a lot of fun. And that's ignoring any other stuff going on at local game store level, sort of thing. And so I would see probably initially judges playing. Um, my first deck, uh, I definitely had a deck by the time that Planar Chaos rolled around.
Mm.
So whenever
Wow,
that
that was
was.
way back.
Thing is, to me, that doesn't because I know there are people that have been playing for much, much longer than that. Like, it doesn't even feel like that long ago to me.
Yeah, I'm
Like,
sure we know Sheldon, so that kind of sets everything in
yeah,
perspective.
but like, yeah, my first one of my first decks was Intet the Dreamer, who at the time was the only red, blue, green legend that existed.
Right, right, right.
Because this is before Animar, this is before a whole
Yeah,
bunch of
Planet
stuff,
Chaos 2007, so wow,
and
that was
essentially I built a really egregious combo deck. Um, and I like I'm still really glad that I made that deck, not because it was a very fun deck either for me or for anyone that I was playing against, but from a pure financial standpoint, I picked up a whole bunch of cards for that deck that have gone through the roof insane. And at one point, they'll pay for my retirement, which will be lovely. Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
so
back when Time Twister was only like $50 or
when
something
Time
instead
Twister
of
was the worst of the Power 9, I have a beta Time Twister that I picked up. I traded in some boxes of product for it. Admittedly, like probably 4 or 5 boxes of product, but
sure, whatever.
but yeah, it was so that was good.
As opposed to now where it's like it's wild living in a world where Twister costs more than Ancestral does. It's
Yes.
wild.
I mean, the bit that's wild to me is that I'm like, I got the beta one because at the time beta was the best version. The alpha version was cheaper.
Corner, you can't use them in Vintage, right? So
Yeah, corners are ruined. Why would you do it? Oh well, but I'm certainly not going to moan about that. I'm in a very fortunate and privileged position of having an awful lot of old cards and getting to play with them. And like by and large, the old cards that I really enjoy. So like my Time Twister, I would shuffle it up and play it. I just don't have a deck that I want to. Um,
right.
but yeah, various other old cards from back in the day I do play. So like my mono green deck, I do cast Eureka with it on a relatively regular basis
I
and
mean,
have a
all
lot.
my soul rings are unlimited for a reason, right? Like that's the era I came up in. That's the era I enjoy to look at when I play the cards.
Right.
So like
And
I
it's
have them to play with them. That's the point.
yeah, it's a funny old thing that like it is fun for me every now and again. And I would say that every time a new set comes out, I don't necessarily look at that set and go, oh, I've got to play this card, I've got to play that card, I've got to play the other card. I almost sort of go, all right, which way are the winds moving? What's going on? What is going to be the thing that I'm going to surprise people with now? And often it'll
Mm.
be what was printed around Mirage that suddenly has got interesting. Because that's where I find my joy a lot of the time is by pulling out a reader and sticking it in the middle of the table and having everyone be like,
What?
why have I never seen this card before? Is my favorite reaction. It's not
Oh,
the
100%.
like it's the moment when people are like, I what do I do now? This is crazy. But yeah, I like digging through and finding the weird cards. But
Yeah, that's like one of my favorite things to do in Magic is just going back and showing people weirdo cards from like 20 years ago that are exactly perfect for this specific reason and nothing else. And they're like, what in the hell is it? Where did this even come from? What does it do? And then they're just like, how come I don't have like 7 of them?
and the answer often is not financial at all. Like
Yeah, it's like a quarter or whatever. No,
yeah,
it's just you just never thought of it or looked at it. And
yeah,
now it's awesome.
and and the thing that I always have to kind of remind myself when we start talking about these things is that like if you and I go into specifics now about some of these cards, what will be true is that I definitely did buy them for 25 cents and then
They're
they
definitely
might
not
not be
25
now.
cents now.
Well, no, I'm not going to say like they're not going to be like hundreds of dollars, but like they might be like $10,
Right.
which is still a lot of money. Like my line in the sand is I don't really like spending more than about $10 on a card
Mm.
because there's so many other cards. Why would I? It's fine. Like
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, it's always fun to pull out something like a Phantom Neshoba that was super good way,
sure.
way back when, and you play it in Netherway, and they're like, "Wait, what? What do you mean? What does that do?" And then suddenly everybody grabs it, looks at it, and they're like, "Whoa, this is amazing!" And yeah, even now it's still like 3, $4, whatever. It's not cheap because it is old, but it's also great and cool and fun. I don't know. I like seeing weirdo cards. Somebody the other day was posing to me that maybe we need to stop playing cards that force people to pick up the card off the table and look so that we can have smoother gameplay. I'm like, no, 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 no. The whole point of Commander is discovery. The whole point is to pick up weirdo cards you've never seen and have bananas things happen as a result.
And the wild thing for me is that there's two schools of thought on the cards that you had to pick up and read, right? There's
Yeah,
we've got these new cards that you had to pick up and read because they've got
a
a
novel.
paragraph of text on there. And so you need to figure out what the sixth ability is on this card because the other five you think you know, but as it's as it turns out, damage can't be prevented when questing beast is attacking. Or you've got the cards that people need to pick up and read because they literally have never seen this card before, in spite of the fact that it has existed for the entire time that they played Magic.
I love that. I love it, especially when you're playing against like a hardened pro who's just here to Commander and they've never played Commander before and they're sitting down. They're like, I've been playing nonstop since 1996. How come I've literally never seen this card before? And I'm like, that's because you saw it once in a draft and threw it away because it cost 12 mana. And you're like, that's a not playable card. And you never thought about it again.
So
And
the
over
next
here,
card that I am going to get someone with that is on my little list that I'm going to cast in a Commander game, and someone is going to be rocked, is a rare from Invasion called Mana Maze.
what?
Exactly. That's the reaction right there. It's a 2 mana enchantment, 1 and a blue, so very competitively
Oh,
costed.
I've
And
seen this card before.
I'm going to be playing this in CEDH. That
What a dumb
you
card. So
can't.
Mana Maze, it's an enchantment for 2 mana, 1 and a blue that says players can't cast spells that share a color with the spell most recently cast this turn. That
Yes,
is that is a mind trick of a card that also wow. That's gonna just stop a whole lot of decks
it's
just dead.
it's a mess. Like, some people look at it and go, "That's sort of Iona," and it's
Or
not.
like it feels like one of the it feels like what's that one card which is like, you target creature is a color that no other like as long
Oh,
as
Dead
these 2
Ringers. As
yeah,
long as these 2 creatures don't share any color, as
yeah,
then
or something with
yeah,
ridiculous text rating. Oh,
yeah.
man, this
That
card
was
is
Invasion Block
in my
too.
head.
Templating was a dream in Invasion Block.
Invasion Block had some wild I mean, the cards are also bizarre, and they're like they use a lot of words to not do a whole lot.
I mean, honestly, no joke of a lie, Invasion Block Constructed is my all-time favorite constructed format, because somehow that 3 block constructed format, there were so many playable cards, and mana was sufficiently fixed. I'm not going to say it was good, because by today's standards, it was not.
No, it
Um,
was the land sucked. I mean, there were a lot of rocks in it, but
but like, you could do so many cool things. Like, there were probably more good viable decks, and admittedly this was pre-Magic Online, so things didn't get solved nearly as quickly, but there were so many interesting cool viable decks in that format that everyone got to do something different. Everyone's decks were pretty good, and it was just a blast.
it does remind me that I wanna make a Sabo Savak deck to play against other people's Joda decks now. It's like, "Yeah, destroy target legend. Take that, buddy." Um, yeah, because like I was saying at the beginning, my introduction to you was because you wrote an article about like because Innistrad had just come out, and obviously Watsy was like, "Here, write about Innistrad." So you're like, "Here's a bunch of decks that you can Halloween theme it," and one of them was like in my pre-release kit, I had cracked a Grimgrin, and this is
Mhm.
my like first real pre-release since I had come back to Magic, and I was like, "This card is sweet," and then you're like, "Here's a way to build a 100 card deck around it," and I'm like, whoa, I can build a deck around this and use Soul Ring and Grimgrin. Holy crap, I'm in. And I used your shell, and except for like a handful of cards that I've upgraded over the years, it's almost the same shell that it started with when you wrote that article in 2011 or something. And so it's like, I love that deck. It's one of my favorite decks of all time. I took out the Storm stuff because I just didn't like Storm even back then.
Me
I was
too.
like, "This is too much, like bouncing my zombie back and forth and then storming off." Yeah, I could, but I would rather just punch you with Grimgrin until you died. And it's
So
weird that
my
that
version of that deck now
mm.
is, I'm not going to say it's almost unrecognizable, because I still recognize it, but like, so at some point that deck changed from being Grimgrin and his zombie pals, which is essentially what it was in, but like, did lots of interesting things. Um, Now it is probably my favorite. It's in my top 2 favorite decks that I still play,
Mm,
and it's still blue black. It has 6 different legends that are blue black,
mm.
so that I can
flip between them.
I can either roll a dice, it's a very convenient number to pick a general. Often I'll let the table pick as a way of like giving them a sense of where I'm coming from. And then each of them is sufficiently different from the other that my gameplay experience will be varied just based on who my general is.
Hmm.
And it's got lots of, like, I would say that almost every time I play it, I switch out a card. And I've just got a kind of a rolling cavalcade of interesting blue and black things going on. Um,
Ship of Theseus over here, man.
yeah, like, I think Undead Alchemist has always been in it.
Yeah, see, I
Um,
took that one out almost immediately just because I didn't like that it turned all the damage into mill, because that wasn't the kind of game that I was interested in playing. But yeah, like that card is really, really powerful. I've
I
used it in the
mean,
Will Help deck.
like, if you've not experienced it, have a bash at Undead Alchemists in play. Like, the easy version is Altar of Dementia is in play. You sack a creature, you mill someone for, let's say, 5, you make 2 zombies, you sack those 2 zombies to mill someone for 4, you'll make 2 zombies. That's the easy version. The other version that is maybe more powerful is just replace Altar of Dementia with Altar of the Brood.
Mm.
So now, whenever a permanent comes into play under your control, you mill everyone apart from yourself for 1. If any of them reveal a creature, it gets exiled and you make a zombie, which means that you mill everyone for 1. And you keep going until no one reveals a creature.
That's so annoying.
it's
That's so
it,
annoying.
it didn't stay in the deck for very long because it's quite powerful.
Yeah,
but
that seems I would get real, real tilted if you played that against me.
this is part of the reason that I shift cards in and out of this deck a lot, is because I feel like if there's novelty to how I'm killing you, then even if it's powerful, then how bad is it really? But if it's just like, oh great, I'm going to get killed by such and such again, like how
Yeah.
much energy do any of us have for that?
I don't know. The thing about that deck for me that I just enjoy is that it's slow, it's plotting, it seems to be doing nothing, and then it just wins. It's like inevitability, like incarnate, right? Like at some point, I've just got 38 zombies and they're all 12/12s, and now you're just going to die.
Well,
It's,
I I've had various deck building philosophies over the years, but one thing that I come back to a lot is that I like it if almost every card in my deck feels like it does something. So,
mm,
like, if I draw a card, like, I don't really like running mana acceleration at all.
mm,
Um, Partly, I like it when games develop a little bit slower because I think it gives everyone more of a chance to just have a nice time. Uh,
sure.
but also, I hate drawing a rampant growth on turn 6.
Oh.
Like, to the point that I'd rather just not run rampant growth. And I mean, it doesn't mean to say that I won't run mana accelerants at all. I'm like, I'm brave, but I'm not stupid. But I'll try and make sure that if I'm running mana, so like I like if I'm running a green deck, I like Jaya Sage, who the creature that gradually gets bigger as I play more creatures and then taps for increasingly more mana. I like Veteran Explorer because it creates interesting blocking decisions and helps everyone get to the mid game. I like mana rocks that have an additional ability of some description. Like, I don't really
Mm,
mind if it means that I'm not casting my 6-drop on turn 3. I'll cast my 6-drop on turn 5. That's fine. But like, if everything like in it, also I don't like vanilla creatures, even if they're absurdly gigantic. Like, I want every card when I draw it to be like, oh, cool, I've just drawn such and such. So lands that do something great, spells that can interact in interesting ways, anything that can create a story, really, I'm like, yes, I'm in, let's do this.
yes. I mean, I think like especially the new 3 mono rocks that all have cool effects are just such a great addition. Like the red one that can copy something and give it haste and then continue to be a rock, or Tower Midnight Clock, which is one of my favorite mono rocks ever now because it just randomly time twisters you after a couple of turns. Um, and I don't know, it just I think WotC is finally understanding that at 3 mana, you can make a really good and interesting rock that you could play, and, they're starting to just make more fun kinda designs, and I think it's well and clever now. It's like it's just it felt like they were had too many pros trying to make commander decks, and they were getting too fast and too low to the ground. They're like, "Whoa, we need to, like, pull back and rebalance where we're aiming the games to be, so that they're not just trying to go speed into the walls." But, as we're kind of winding down here, though, tell me about opening a bar. Why did you do that? Sorry about that timing, man.
I mean, the timing was just unfortunate. So technically, it wasn't that I went, you know what? It's 2020. Let's open a bar. Um, no, so
I love the title. Isn't your thing called Turn Zero?
the bar is called Rule Zero.
Rule Zero. Ah, I
Yeah.
love it.
And in essence, myself and my business partner, we had a game store before that place, and it started off as purely a game store, and we were sort of loosely attached to a bar nearby. That bar wasn't doing very well; it closed. We started selling. We got our liquor license, started selling drinks as well.
Did
Um,
you have room in your game shop to have, like, table and food and things?
at that point, we didn't have food; we just had drinks.
Hmm.
And then the venue that we were in, we like the lease expired, we had to move, and we were like, okay, it's put up or shut up time. We're either going to go big or we're going to just kind of say that was a fun thing and leave it. And we decided to go big, which, you know, it remains to be seen whether or not, given everything that's happened since, that was a great idea given the circumstance. I think it's a great idea in abstract. It's just this is a tough old time to have a bar slash restaurant slash game store.
Three things that require people to congregate in one
Well,
place.
it's also got a theater downstairs, so
Oh, lord.
maybe four. But yeah, so we were basically in the process of doing fit out. We had been open for 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month, before the writing started to be on the wall that we were going to have to be closed for quite a while. And but yeah, it's been weird. Like, we're back open now and fairly busy, but obviously we're still trying to dig ourselves out of that hole. So if people are in London and want to come by and have a few drinks and play some games, I will not be sad about that.
Yeah, like, I mean, being able to stay open through the lockdown is such like, so many businesses died. So unto that, you should be, like, commended for just even keeping through. So I do wish you well because, like, we need game stores. We need places to congregate and hang out. We just need to do it in a way that's not gonna kill us all, and that seems to be a challenge here in America and elsewhere. Um, but that's rad, man, and what was it like when Sheldon came and asked you to join the CAG? How did he do that? Because I know I'd been saying, like, "We need to bring Tim Willoughby on," because
Well, I've known Sheldon for a very long time. We were on coverage together for a good while. I knew
people
him
forget that
as a
Sheldon used to do
judge,
coverage. It's funny.
various other bits and pieces. Um, we've actually not played that many games of Commander together, but we've definitely played some. I think that probably a tipping point was when I wrote my big giant thing about why the banned cards are banned, where I
Mm.
was just like, I've quietly been playing a lot of Commander for a very long time, but I've not really talked about it tons because I've been talking about other aspects of Magic. And I was just like, I think someone had moaned about Coalition Victory and why is it banned. And so initially I wrote like 2,000 words just about Coalition Victory. Because,
That is 2,000 more than that card deserves.
I mean, it's one of those things where, like, for a long while when I was writing a lot, like doing GPs, I would be writing a feature per round for 9 rounds a day, 2 days in a row. So, like, I can crank out writing very, very quickly when I'm of a mind to. And I wrote that one. I was like, I'm just going to do one for every card on the ban list, just so that we're clear. And threw it out there, and a few people read it and seemed to quite like it. And I'd spoken to Sheldon a couple of times, and he'd sort of, at that point, we'd kind of sort of said, I don't need to be on the CAG for any sense of self-aggrandizement or anything else. And I was like, I'm very happy to not be on the CAG, and for you to, if you want to ask me what I think about something, I'll always tell you. I think was
Yeah,
roughly the
exactly.
line I get. But But then, yeah, he did get in touch, and it was very sort of heartening to get to be part of the community and sort of have a reason that when everyone tells me how they feel about all of these cards, that it doesn't feel like for them that they're screaming into the void quite so much, because I can actually pass it on somewhere and hopefully have that be helpful.
Sometimes I wish people would scream more into the void and less at me, but that's a different.
If they want to get into my ats, they're welcome to. Like, by and large, like I would say, everyone on the CAG and the RC has slightly different positions.
Yes.
Broadly, I think we agree on a lot of things, but we also disagree on enough to keep things interesting. And like, something that I think is cool is that, as far as I can tell, everyone is swayable. Everyone is open to at least hearing the arguments. I'm not going to say that that means that people will be swayed, but like,
Mm,
I know that for myself, for example, I have some pretty firm opinions on most of the ban list and most of the sort of key policy bits um,
sure.
for Commander. But someone can give if someone gives me an argument that makes sufficient sense that I've not heard before, that like my opinion is open to being changed on things.
Yeah, I mean, I have big hills that I'll die on. Like, I'm very much a proponent of keeping Soul Ring around, keeping like doubling season around, things like big flashy effects. I definitely pull for the lower end of the tables and more fun Timmy type things. But at the same time, I also am cognizant of how the format works and what it means for the global fan base and not just my table. And so, yeah, I think a lot of us being adults have like a reasonable understanding of where we're at contextually, where the game is at contextually, and how we can reconcile these two positions. Like it's something you just kind of have to do in order to have consensus or have this type of thing work, right? Like, I mean, obviously you're gonna have times like Golos where there's people who are very adamantly this shouldn't have been banned, and people who are like this should have been banned at day one, and like I was definitely like a begrudging like you should have banned it at the beginning, it's here now. Maybe we should keep it, but I'm also not afraid to let it go because it has to. And I think we are all erudite enough that when we have discussions, people are very good at laying out ways to explain what they're talking about and what their point is so that other people don't feel condescended to, but also can be like can understand what that position is, right?
I
Like,
certainly hope so. Yeah, I mean, and I think that one of the bits that I'm kind of enthused about, that is still kind of in its nascent stages at the moment, I suppose, is broadening out a little bit what the CAG/RC role is. That it's not just, here's our band list, let's make sure that people A, know what that band list is, and B, vaguely understand why it is what it is. Like, there's so much stuff around like creating a nurturing environment, creating tools for people to be able to have the conversations to figure out which games they really want to be in and how to have fun with those games. Like,
mm, mm,
bits of information about how to build decks, bits of information about how to find games, bits of information, like, basically, if we're talking about, to circle back, knowing yourself, how to figure out what it is you like and how to act on that in order to best achieve it, I suppose.
yes. I think we as a body need to start doing more to help the community and to actually, develop our positions and make it so people know who we are and what we talk about and what we're here to help them do. And I think we're definitely taking steps toward doing that, but we're not moving as fast as I would like to see, but we're also adults with real lives.
I mean, I'm writing a book, so
Yeah, oh yeah, what are you doing? What weren't you writing like a commander book?
I am still writing a commander book. It's, as it turns out, like, it's taken longer than I expected. Partly because, as it turns out, opening a bar is also quite a busy endeavor. Um, but it's coming along, and it's like,
what
I'm
is
excited about it.
what are you trying to do? What is the point of the book?
I mean, roughly speaking, it's kind of taking a bunch of the unspoken or unwritten or under talked about bits and putting them all in one place for someone. So, like,
Mm,
at the very basic level, it's like, okay, there has been lots written and said about how to build your first deck, and or how to like optimize, or how to um, find your key staple cards or whatever. But there's not necessarily been loads written recently about, say, how to navigate a turn or a number of turns, or thought processes for how to build a collection so that you can
Mm.
build decks and have good time. Or like there's quite a lot of chapters in it that are almost a bit philosophical about sort of like just figuring out how to have a nice time for yourself and other people.
Are you
Um,
going to have a chapter on this is why mass land destruction is not the best idea?
um, Not necessarily by word, but I would hope that by the end of it, people have got the general idea on that front. Um, like I can imagine a situation where mass land destruction might be, I'm not going to say cool, but okay. But that's because I've got a good imagination rather than because I think that it should show up very often.
Yeah, like
Um,
people are like, why don't you just ban these things outright? I'm like, no, that's not the point because there's tables that want to have cutthroat, fun, aggressive time, and there's no reason not to. I'm just trying to encourage you not to bring that to toddler table. Maybe, you know, uh,
yeah, I mean, I actually think that like if you've got a table where everyone says that their deck is an 8 or maybe an 8.5, a 9, I really hate using metrics like that to do it, but we're to cover things quickly. Like if everyone says that their deck is a 9, then cast Ruination and see what happens.
yeah, let's go. Yockle ups, here we come. But anyways, friend, it's been lovely to talk to you, and I'm so glad we were able to finally make this work after years of trying. I'm super excited. I mean, it's been great, and I hope we get another chance to do this again. And I look forward to actually reading your book when it finally does come out. But if people wanted to find you and see your essay or ask you about like things that they don't want to bring up to me, where can they go?
All things they do want to bring up to you. Get two heads
Yeah,
are better than one, right?
fact.
Yeah. So probably the easiest way of getting in touch with me online is just to tweet at me at Tim's Wheelbarrow. Um, it's been my username on the internet forever, since before we had our real names as things. But yeah, at Tim's Wheelbarrow on Twitter, or literally come to East London, come to Rule Zero and pop in. I'm almost always at work, so it's relatively easy to track me down in that regard. I will say that if your plan is to talk my ear off about the issues that you have with Commander, I will request that you buy me a drink.
um, oh man, that reminds me. You know what? One of my favorite segments with you was when uh, Marshall was doing an episode of Limited Resources, and he wanted to simulate a draft, and you guys were in a hotel room at a PC or something, and he had you pretend to be Tim, Will, and Obi, the three people who were trying to draft packs to pass to him to do a live draft.
Yeah,
It's still
that
one of
was
my
that
favorite
was
episodes
fun.
of all time.
I did that at Marshall's house many moons ago. I think I've done two of them actually.
Yeah,
But it's like I think that there's a lot to be learned from sort of playing different styles of Magic, getting a feel for what different types of people want to play. I feel very fortunate that with the bar and with my life experience and whatnot, that I've had a chance to see lots of different levels of players, ages, stages, experience levels, styles of players. So I feel like I've got a fair idea of lots of fun things that can be done. And I just like all ultimately I want from anyone is for them to figure out what they enjoy and help them best achieve it, I guess.
amen to that. As always, my friends, if you want to find me, you can find me at Gearpuri Gears. You can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are sold, or at Cool Stuff Inc. on Tuesdays, or at YouTube on Thursdays. Thank you, EK. And remember, my friends, it is not magic without the gathering, and we will see you next time.